Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I take a look at the last 5 new to me board games that I've played, and I rank and review them in order of preference. Now before I get started on today's 5 games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have City Builder. So this is a tile placement game where you are trying to build up this big kind of Roman city, essentially by having certain kind of features or landmarks in these independent zones, as well as some places to put your citizens. The way you score is actually fairly unique, as you have these kind of racks of these buildings with kind of three columns on them, and you have kind of the big buildings, you have little buildings each side of certain colours, and because these racks are pointing towards you and your opponent, you can only build the coloured buildings that are on the edges or the extremities of those particular columns. So you are restricted on what you can build at any time, but the more you go to the same column, the more points you will unlock. And of course you can start eating into your opponent's side and prevent them from building stuff, which is quite a cool little twist, and I like that quite a bit. Now the tile placement itself is very easy. Again, I think they're just square tiles, and you're just trying to build these different areas, and once you complete them, you can score them. But the actual shapes and the way that these different boundaries are divided out is pretty unique, and they do create some pretty interesting patterns and different areas and so on. The game does also have this pretty cool mechanism where if you build a very particular shape, like a little rectangle, and you have certain features in that rectangle, then you can claim one of these, I think it's like an ongoing benefit or endgame scoring opportunity, to place onto your player board that only you will have for the rest of the game. And I thought that was a really nice little touch, and it worked really well. Now, my biggest issue with this game is basically functionality, because not only is it not colorblind friendly, it's almost impossible for me to differentiate the different building types. The artwork itself is extremely busy, and it's difficult to actually work out where those boundaries are, and you kind of have to just squint and kind of constantly just look twice where you just want to look once easily. You can't really do that with this game. Maybe that's my own personal kind of visual style that I like, having things very concrete and clear. This game was just a bit obscured in the artwork in terms of the actual the boundaries of these different zones. Now the artwork itself looks great. I mean, as a piece of artwork, it's fantastic. But again, functionality, it's not nice to look at all, or not useful to look at, I would say. But all in all, it's it's a fine game. I do like the way that those different zones do formulate. I think some of the tiles that you can claim are way more powerful than others, and they're kind of imbalanced, really. No, that's not a big issue because people might want to fight for those best tiles. But all in all, I think there's way better tile placement games out there. And I might even say I'd rather play something even simpler, something like Carcassonne over this one. And I'm not even a big fan of Carcassonne. So that is City Builder, a fine game, just nothing to write home about. And it feels like it's kind of lost in the sea of obscurity. That is City Builder at number 5. At number 4, I have Lords of Vegas. So definitely a cult favourite game after being out of print for so long. Unfortunately, it's back in print now, hence why I've had a chance to play it. But if you're not aware of what Lords of Vegas is, it's a very chaotic, dice-driven, economic game where you are trying to build casinos, make money, and then hopefully convert that money into points. Now, I suppose the main talking point I want to say about this game is that this isn't a fast filler game. It's a full-blown game really. It's going to take an hour and a half or so to play it, but it is riddled in randomness and chaos. And despite me saying that, I think it's probably the best combination of a longer game with chaos that I've ever played. It doesn't really feel like all your efforts was just wasted and down to dice rolls, even though they probably were. I think the game really embraces the feeling of kind of Vegas, and even if your back is against the wall due to bad luck, you can kind of gamble on yourself and try to take a punt and shoot for the moon and crawl back to the game that way. So full props for that. I think it really did pull off this very difficult recipe, again, being chaotic in its nature, but still being a full-length board game. So mechanically, the game is pretty simple. It has somewhat references to a game like Chinatown, where you are trying to buy these different plots of land to expand your casinos of different types. And then you're trying to put higher value dice onto these casinos so that you'll generate more money when those casinos cash out. Lower plots with lower dice values are cheaper, but of course are going to give you slower income, but there are ways to get around that by kind of readjusting the dice on these different casinos. There's a constant kind of wrestling for position to control these casinos, because multiple players can have a stake in these casinos by having dice of their colour on them, but only the highest pipped value dice will be the boss of that casino and will score points for it. And there are kind of ways you can do a bit of a hostile takeover by paying money equal to the total pip value of that casino, and hopefully that your dice will then be or come out on top, and then that casino will be yours. It can be a huge expensive gamble, especially if those casinos are bigger, but it could be worth it, as I said, if your back is against the wall. And that was kind of a really ongoing thing when I played this recently, was that we were really going for that kill and hoping to take over those big casinos, and betting on ourselves really, and just going with the luck. But of course you can do different things by maybe focusing on yourself a little bit more, maybe trying to buy plots of land that aren't so vulnerable to be taken by the other players. You can build up as well as spreading out to increase your yield of points. And the scoring system itself is fairly interesting, because at the start of the game you can just trickle along getting 1 point at a time per casino. But after a while you need to at least have a 2-size casino in order to go to the next points threshold, and then it's like a 3-size casino and a 4-size casino, and so on. So the kind of cadence of this game, or the forward arc of the game, is actually pretty good. And it's a nice passive catch-up mechanism where if someone's really running away with things, they'll hit this roadblock where they need to start expanding the casinos, and hopefully if you're falling behind a bit, you'll start trickling behind and start making some ground up. So this is definitely a game of big moments. You can use some negotiation if you want to. I don't think it's necessary, to be honest. But again, some mean moments, some huge swings of luck. Again, chaotic to its very core, but it works. So I would really like to play this game some more. I'm not quite sure what the optimal player count is, because maybe 4's best. I think my only nitpick in this game is that it's a little bit too procedural, and the luck can really hit you. You have to go into this game knowing that. So I didn't feel disgruntled by it, but again, be prepared that you could play an hour-and-a-half game and just all the dice rolls go against you and you'd be left out of pocket, while someone who played maybe equally as well or as bad as you did really well and completely smashed you through no real fault of your own. But still, that's Vegas. That's the whole point of the game, and I enjoyed it, and I can certainly see why people love this one. So that is Lords of Vegas at number 4. At number 3, I have Iliad. So this is the first of the Mythos collection by Bitewing Games. This is a 2-player only abstract strategy game by Rainer Knizia, one of my favourite designers of all time. And what you're doing in this game is that you are trying to complete rows and columns on this grid to collect tiles, or these kind of point scoring tiles on the edges of those particular rows and columns. If you have the highest value of player pieces in that particular row or column, when it is completed, then you'll get the best tile and your opponent will get the kind of the second, or the next one, or the other one. And what you're trying to do here is that you are trying to collect a whole set of these different types of gods. If you do that and your opponent doesn't, then you will win instantly. If you both do it, then it will come down to point scoring. So it does have this kind of chicken mechanism where you have to bet on yourself to be able to get them all. If you don't have that confidence to get them all, you might want to do a U-turn and really focus on not only blocking your opponent from getting the tiles that they want, but also obviously building up your points cache as well, so that you have an advantage in that realm of the victory. Mechanism wise, so easy. All you do is you have, I think it's 2 tiles in your hand at any time, and then you're going to be placing that tile onto somewhere onto that grid as long as it is edge to edge with another tile on the map. Now, the tiles themselves come in, I think it's 5 different strength levels. The 5 itself is obviously very powerful, but it does not have a special ability, and all the other tiles do have special abilities. So I think the number 1 tile allows you to move a tile of your opponent's somewhere on that grid to another space. The 2 lets you move another one of yours. The 3 lets you swap one of your scoring tokens with one from the kind of central reserve. And the 4 allows you to force your opponent to flip over an adjacent tile, but you have to do the same, meaning that those tiles are worth nothing. But I do like the way that each tile is fighting on 2 fronts. So of course you are contributing to the vertical axes as well as the horizontal axes, meaning that you really want to exploit those higher powered and higher valued tokens. Especially if you can make something score and then move that token again to use that higher power token in another line or column. So some good little tricks you can pull off here, some good powers, and it's a very cerebral game. And again, gameplay wise, I think it's super refined, really. It's very clever, but for me it came across as a little bit too mathy. You look at the board and there's just a whole bunch of numbers thrown at you. You're constantly calculating and recalculating the values of not only your opponent but yourself in each line and column. It's hard to just look at the map at a gaze and see, I need this particular god, and I'm doing that there, but I'm not doing well there, but I might get that, but I might not get that, so I don't know if I want that god yet, and so on. So it's quite overwhelming. Of course, if you are more abstract gamed natured, then you're probably going to get a kick out of that. And it's definitely going to be a game where the best player will win. I think it's very cerebral, very thinky, and very head-to-head in the feel and vibe of the game. So, weirdly enough, I would have probably preferred this game if it didn't have some of those powers, if it was just simply numbers and you tried to optimally place each number. But I think the actual shifting of the tiles around actually didn't improve the game. I thought it made, although maybe the richness of the game went up in terms of its complexities, I thought it made it a little bit messy, and it just kind of felt a bit fiddly moving things around and again recalculating again and again and again. Production wise, it's a mixed bag for me. I've got no idea why the publisher decided to go with these cloth mats rather than a board, especially because this is like a game where you especially need the map to lie flat because of the way that tiles are placed, and it's just like bumpy, and all the tiles are just kinked up and don't quite lay flat, and it doesn't look right, and it's hard to reach in and pull tiles out and move them to other spaces. Also, the artwork on the tiles, although they're clearly blue and red, it would have been nice to see more variety in the art style as well, based on the 2 different clans that you are playing. It sounds like I'm giving this game a negative review or negative thoughts. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's more of a matter of the game not being right for me, but me objectively liking what it does. But I would like to see, and I know Knizia does this, I would like to see this game again, but based or doing without those special abilities, or maybe making those abilities slightly different, rather than shifting tiles that have already been placed. I didn't like that part of the game at all, if I'm honest. But I know a lot of people are going to like this one, and to be honest, I thought I was going to love it. For me, it was just decent. That is Iliad at number 3. At number 2, I have Ichor, which is the second game from the Mythos collection from Bitewing, again by Rainer Knizia, and again it is a 2-player only abstract strategy game. And to me, Ichor feels a bit more like a traditional abstract game as you're moving your pieces around the map. And the objective of this game is to try and shed your little player tokens by depositing them on this grid before your opponent does. So it's a very clear-cut winning condition. And I like the back and forth of, as you're moving your units around, not only are you depositing your own tokens, but you are removing your opponent's pieces by going over them. Now, your pieces, or basically one player is going to depict the kind of Greek gods, the other player is going to be the titans or the monsters, and each of these units that you are playing with has its own unique ability that can be used once per game. And these abilities are pretty useful, and they're all kind of interesting and can be exploited in their own individual circumstances. And again, I like the way that you have to strike when it's just right, because you can use it once, so you want to use it to its maximum potency. And some of these abilities might be things like, we'll remove all the tokens surrounding this particular piece, or you can break the rules by jumping over an opponent's piece, or you can lap around the map, or you can maybe mirror the last ability that your opponent used as a kind of copycat mechanism. And again, you have to use them very sparingly, because most of the time you'll just be doing basic moves by moving as far as you can, again, horizontally or vertically, trying to create nice long runs for yourself so you can deposit a bunch of these tokens at once, because each space that you move over or skip over, you will deposit one of your pieces. And if you're not careful, you can catch your opponent off guard, or they can catch you off guard super quickly, and the game can be over, rapid fire. So you need to be very careful about what opportunities you leave to your opponent. Lots of blocking, lots of kind of sheltering or shielding your own pieces. And I like the game because it is so tight on the map. You don't really have that much maneuverability, meaning that every single move or action you take is of paramount importance. The game itself only takes around maybe 20 to 30 minutes to play, and that's if you have a real cerebral battle. And I just like the way the game feels. I like the variety of the gods and the monsters you can play with, because you do not see them all per game. And it just has this nice clean feel to it. And I was a little bit concerned about there being an information dump when it comes to all the different abilities, but the symbology is actually very good, and there are some good reference aids where you can quickly learn not only your abilities, but the abilities of your opponent too. So I like the way that was managed. So I think if you like abstract games like Onitama, you like abstract games like War Chest, you're probably going to get a good value out of this one, because it's different enough to warrant owning them all, but they feel familiar when it comes to an abstract strategy game. So really liked it. I kind of want to dig deeper, really see how I can really exploit those abilities of those gods, and it's a lot of fun. So that is Ichor at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Australis by Leo Colovini and Alessandro Zucchini. Now, these are two designers who tend to work for me, and I've enjoyed a lot of their previous designs. And this is certainly a gateway level game, and I don't normally buy big box games when they are as light as this one, but this one really appealed to me, and I'm obviously very glad that I did choose to pick this one up and play it, because I've enjoyed this one thoroughly. And it is pretty much a kitchen sink of introductory gateway style board game mechanisms, but the overall package and how all these moving parts are kind of harmonized is super impressive to me, and the overall feel of the game is just lovely. So this one, you are drafting dice in turn. Each round you're going to be drafting 4 dice, and all these dice will come with a specific action, but at different strengths depending on how quickly you want to draft these dice and what was rolled. So you've got the kind of the turtle track, where when you take the turtle die, you'll go as far as you can down on this track depending on the value that you've drafted, which will simply be passive points at the end of the round, as well as a tiebreaker that can be very important. You've got the coral pieces, which means you can deploy coral in these different bays, and if you've got the majority in each of these zones at the end of the round, then you'll score more points. You've got these fish schools, where you take these fish from the supply. The more fish the merrier, but you need to collect these food cubes in order to score the maximum from them. So it's kind of this little balancing thing you need to do, like not only having loads of fish, but having the food to feed the fish. And you've got card drafting as well, where you are building up this engine of cards by tucking them onto your player board. And when you take certain actions of those colours, then you'll get a little boon as well by getting passive victory points, or passive fish, or being able to deploy more coral onto the board, and so on. So those are the core moving parts of the game. Again, track climbing, area control, card drafting, and engine building. And that's pretty much what the game entails. But the thing about this game that really does elevate the fun factor is this dice drafting mechanism, where at the end of each round, players will have this roll off, and basically you'll roll all the dice with numbers that you've collected in that round, and each roll, the lowest values will be taken out of the mix. And whoever is the last man standing will get access to these really high scoring turtle tiles that will be saved for the end game, or you can even get food cubes, which can of course complement your fishing ability. Yes, it's pretty much purely random. I mean, there are some very loose mitigation tools by collecting these little engine building cards. But again, it really does help the game rather than hinder it. And I might be in a smaller school of people or class of people who would say that. I think a lot of people would be put off by the random nature of those dice rolls. But the game is so light and so quick that it's just like an engaging mechanism, and it's just pure visceral dice rolling, and it just seems to complement the rest of the game really well, even though it can be the difference maker in who wins the game or not. But again, it does come down to what dice you've drafted, because the different colours of dice will come in different numerical values, meaning if you take the higher valued dice, depending on the colour, then you've got better odds of winning the roll-off. So you can factor that into your strategy. So you are going in with a bit of information on who's likely to win the roll-off. I would recommend this game to anybody dipping their toe into the hobby. I'd recommend this to more experienced gamers to use as not a lure, but a gateway tool to teach to younger children or first-time gamers. It is just a wonderful blending of these mechanisms. I think it's a great use of that turtle track when it comes to breaking ties for other things, kind of really upping the importance of it. The engine building is satisfying, as you can just take actions, get tons of little benefits on the back of that. And yeah, all in all, it is just a lovely gateway game that I'd recommend people have it in their collection to use in the right occasion. And I can see this one being a slow burner. I think it's going to be widely enjoyed, and I think it has all the hallmarks to be kind of a mega hit, really. And I think if this is not a mega hit, that would be a crying shame, because I think this is probably one of the best lighter games that I've played in some years. I was really impressed, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect, if it was going to be a little bit too light for me and maybe a little bit too boring and predictable. I don't feel that way at all. I think it is a really good, well-designed, clean example of a well-executed intro-level game that's still even satisfying to saltier gamers. I played this game the other day with myself and two other gamers who we played extremely heavy Euros, and we all came out of this game thinking it was brilliant. So that is Australis at number 1. So there we have it. That concludes another video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.